This is the weekly wrap up presented by the Conversation Project, and I am Jay Cleveland Payne. And this is simply a wrap up of the news stories that we posted all week in the Conversation Project feeds on Facebook and X/Twitter. And we talked about at least most of these throughout the week with the things you might have heard, videocasts and podcasts, which happens every single weekday morning on the internets. And here we're going to give you the purest numbers of the stories. Every day we give you the top stories that you say are vetted as conversational, and we pull them into a narrative that works out for the best story. Today, we're going to get you the top 10 stories, period. We put all the stories of the week together in one big old list and reshuffle them to see which stories won out as the top. So we're going to give you the straight, pure top 10 engagement stories for you, plus some perspective with the Almost Ran, some stories that weren't quite top 10, but a lot of those in the Almost Rans, 11 through 15, did get more love because they seem more conversational, seem more able to get a story out of them. That's just how things work out here for the podcast. And much love, that's a story that basically gets no love of the week. We dubbed that story the Almost Relevant Story of the Week. This story is literally at the very bottom of the list for the week. And this week, that story is at number 197. 197 distinct different postings this week on news stories. This one got almost no response whatsoever. We'll explain that as we get deeper into this countdown and how the feeds work, how engagement works out, and everything going forward. So stop by our website. This is theconversationproject.com. More details on how we do this thing literally every single day, give you news, information, and some insights from people that you may not really get a chance to talk to, and have fun in the process as well. Let's get into the countdown, doing it Casey Kasem style, 10 to 1, with the top 10 stories per your engagement this week of the week ending October 28th, 2023. Starting off with headline number 10. Man who crashed into Chinese consulate in San Francisco was armed with knife, crossbow, police say. This is a uniquely American story, as we'll get deeper into detail about a story that happened later this week about an actual successful attack in a town. This is one that was unsuccessful, thank God. Police say that Zhang Yang got out of his car and stood against a wall, covering his face with his left arm and holding a knife on his right hand. He then turned towards Sergeant Troy Casaro and consulate security guard and started swinging a knife. San Francisco Police Chief Bill Scott said officers are trained to prioritize stopping a threat when confronted with an active attacker, and Yang doesn't have a gun, so it was a slightly different sort of thing, but they were able to take care of that. The crash, condemned by the Chinese government and the White House, and took place in San Francisco, prepared to host next month's Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. Police have served several warrants at Yang's apartment in the past. This seems like to be one single guy who has one single beef against, I guess, China and the United States. And it's an issue that has been resolved as peacefully as you can say. We'll go deeper in detail on more stories like this, unfortunately, as we go deeper into the countdown for stories of import for the week. At number 9, we're kicking off one of our teaser stories that was Dwight Howard. And this is a story that literally did happen, but the reports on it online are starting to disappear. Maybe not so sure because Dwight Howard is spotting back or what's happening. But the headline that we put out originally from TotalProSports.com, it's a blog that does sort of hater type stuff anyway, was the fact that Dwight Howard was responding to haters over admitting a threesome. The big story is there's a lawsuit against Dwight Howard, who's not playing in the States right now. I think he's playing in China someplace. He's still playing basketball, but not playing for an NBA team at the moment. Stemming from a 2021 allegation where Dwight Howard essentially picked up a dude on social media and asked him if he wanted to engage in, quote, consensual sexual activity with him and some other guy. It's a really big sort of detailed thing that the details sort of matter, but we're not going into detail here. If you can find the story out there, because trust me, it's been beefed all over the place. You can find more details of what's going on there to find out how it works out. Get into the thing. Now, he responded on social media with a video that was more or less a joke video, if you will. But he admitted that something happened. I hate to be so vague and sort of open about this, but it's one of those things where it's just kind of famous people doing sort of dumb stuff because they're famous and getting caught in it. Now, the video itself essentially is gone, at least not in the main feed. So if you can find it someplace, somebody saved it, you can see exactly what his response was. But essentially, he admitted to this thing happening. He reached out to some guy to say, hey, let's have sex with another guy. And there's a lawsuit about it. Howard basically wants to tell folks just kind of mind your own business. But like I said, the video is hard to find now because it's seemingly gone. One of two hurricanes to make the news story this week in our top 10. Hurricane Otis makes landfall near Acapulco as Category 5 storm, threatening nightmare scenarios for southern Mexico. This we posted on Wednesday, late Wednesday, I think, as it hit sometime in the afternoon. And Hurricane Otis did knock out communications and unleashed a nightmare scenario in Acapulco as a Category 5 storm that hit the city there in the state. As a very big popular tourist place, a lot of people weren't quite prepared for what was going on. The president, of course, ordered residents to seek shelter and stay in place, along with anyone who was still there as a tourist there. It was not forecast to become a hurricane until early Tuesday morning, and then it moved in pretty quickly. So it's, another force of nature that was hard to deal with. Maybe it's the climate change. Maybe it's just the luck of the draw. They're able to keep an eye on it and watch it as it came in there, and people were kept relatively safe. This story was the original posting, so it doesn't have the updates to what was actually there, what actually happened in damage and loss of life. There was some loss of life. There was some damages there. But this story doesn't have the update to that. Feel free to look up Hurricane Otis, one of two hurricanes, and we'll have the other hurricane coming soon in the countdown as we move on. The problem with Jon Stewart is a show on Apple TV. And the problem with Jon Stewart's show is that Apple TV has a problem with Jon Stewart and his show. Our headline reads, Jon Stewart's Apple TV Plus show ends reportedly over coverage of AI in China. So Jon Stewart basically and Apple TV have parted ways over creative differences. The creative differences is Jon Stewart and his team want to do stories about sort of biting topics like how AI is affecting us and what China is doing. And Apple's like, nah, we don't really want to do that. And so they're parting ways. Another thing that kept the show from staying around is the fact it's not as popular as you would think. Now, back on Comedy Central, when there was filler stuff and made for ratings and people watched it, or that was the Comedy Central show, the Daily Show, Jon Stewart was on that. It was a thing where people watched it, people tuned into it, and they checked it out on the social media, come back to it as that grew forward. For Apple TV, it's not about eyeballs per se. It's not really about advertisers. There's no advertisement in the show. Your subscribers pay for it up front. So everybody pays for everything, but the people who are paying for everything aren't tuning into Jon Stewart's show. It is getting some reaction on social media and getting those clips there, but that's not bringing people into Apple TV to pay for Apple TV or watch Jon Stewart's show. So if the show's not being popularized and you can't track in the eyeballs, it's one reason not to keep it. Also, because they want to talk about things like AI in China, things that Apple really doesn't want to kind of piss off because China is where most of their devices are made and where a lot of them are being sold. And AI is something that I think Apple really wants to get a part of and not really try to push off. So with that, the show apparently is now gone from Apple TV Plus. We'll see what happens with that. And if there's another Jon Stewart project happening someplace, and the big thing, who's going to foot the bill? Now, we're going to get to the shooting in Maine very, very soon. But the number 6 story for this week is a headline that reads, before Maine mass shooting, Senate approved amendment that would scale back veteran background checks for guns. This is important, very important. And this posting came out after the shooting happened, so because it was relevant to that one. But the U.S. Senate approved an amendment that would scale back background check requirements for some veterans and service members with mental health issues, hours before a U.S. Army reservist allegedly shot and killed 18 people in Lewiston, Maine. It's just the irony of the timing going forward. Essentially it is called the Kennedy Amendment. It passed by a vote of 53 to 45. It prevents the secretary from transmitting information to criminal background checks system unless a relevant judicial authority rules the beneficiary is a danger to himself. Essentially, it keeps the Veterans Affairs folks from transmitting any issues that might be of a risk of a mental ability for someone who's a veteran based on different cases. If they are essentially a true problem to themselves, a true issue, and they have actually documented stuff, then yes, they could transmit that for the background check, but otherwise, no. I think the point of this was to speed up the background check process and do a little solid for the veterans, if you will. However, there is an issue with this, specifically because the suspect in the shooting in Maine, Robert Card, had mental issues and was a highly trained, at least that's the way the news put him out there, highly trained member of the Army Reservists, Army National Guard, and a weapons instructor. So he knew what to do with the weapons, and he knew evasive maneuvers and things like that that they thought was going to be an issue for what's going on. We'll talk more about that when we get to the actual story on Robert Card. But hours before he went on the rampage, and literally no real connection other than the fact that the irony of time, the Senate passed a resolution, an amendment to basically make it easier for veterans who had possible mental issues but nothing serious to get past background checks. One of these things where I always say, your mileage may vary, definitely in this one. At number 5 this week, the story headline reads, MTV EMA, that's European Music Awards, canceled due to Hamas-Israeli conflict. It's that simple. The awards were originally scheduled for November the 5th. That's coming up, up next weekend, but not going to happen, postponed due to what they're calling bad weather. The weather is essentially the weather is going on with the conflict in Israel, where Hamas and Palestine and Israel and other countries are having their beefs right now, and it's hard to kind of really pull together what's going on. What's coming out of this is a lot of folks are really afraid, and yes, they are afraid of taking sides. We've talked about taking sides for literally the 3 weeks we've done this, and people are worried about what's going to happen and who's going to shout out Israel and who's going to rep Palestine and what's going forward. We're seeing a lot of that here in the States, where people who are looking to support people in Palestine who really need support, but also kind of bash the Israelis for, being Israelis, which in some cases there's some beef on that as well. It's a complicated issue that is literally goes back to biblical times. So we're not going to solve this in the next couple of days, but the fact that we're having these discussions, very heated discussions, and the way they're happening is a nuance of the time and era today, and of social media, where basically anybody can say what they want to and put it out there, and it can be seen in theory by anyone around the world. The robots are coming for us, but they're going to come for us by apparently not being mad because we're forcing them to do their work. They're going to do our work for us and make us fat and lazy and just let us, meander away that way. The story at number 4 this week is White Castle is rolling out fry cook robots across the U.S. The fast food chain is outsourcing some of its jobs to robots, with the new Miso Robotics Flippy 2 going to many of the stores go across the nation starting in 2020. Essentially, the robot does the fry station. It drops the fries, it cooks them to temperature, pulls them out, it dumps them, you flip them over there. Team members who work with Flippy are happy, and the rollout is going very well, we're told. And it's not unfathomable to think that might have the robots be more coming in plan as well. So it's there. Now, dropping fries and doing fries, not exactly menial task, but it is something that is kind of repetitive, that can be done fairly simply by pressing a button. You can see that going on. Now, there are other stores, other places where we're doing more things. There's even a Boston restaurant that offers rice bowls prepared by robots. They portion out the rice and the meat and the things there and serve out there, because it can be something that is set ahead and done pretty well. We'll see how this is going, whether the robots will actually overthrow us and then decide they don't want to feed us, because it's not so much they're going to be smarter than us and try to kill us. They just will, lock the refrigerator and make us starve. Maybe that's the plan. We now go to the actual story that has been overtaking everything this week, in a month where the story of Israel overtook everything this month. This story of the past couple of days have overtaken everything here in the States as people cover this one. In fact, the irony of it is the fact that the people over in Israel covering the Israeli conflict are going live to Lewiston, Maine to do live hits back and forth. It was surreal. We dropped that in our TikTok. This is just kind of weird watching and listening to it. The headline that we have, for the original headline, is Mass Shooting Hits Multiple Locations in Lewiston, Maine. This story is updated from that story. So this has more details into it from the headline. I don't have the updated headline in the notes here, but at least 18 people dead, 13 more injured after gunmen opened fire in Lewiston, Maine on Wednesday evening. Shooting happened starting at a local bowling alley and then going to a bar. It was a youth night at the bowling alley, so there were kids and things going on there, and it was just kind of a bedlam of crazy, if you will, happening in the sort of younger part of the evening. One that happened when the ironies about this happening was I basically had literally put all the stories lined up for the evening and had essentially went to bed, went to some other things, paid attention to other stuff. I did some other work, whatever, and didn't really check the news until the morning where it was all over the place and it was just the overtaking of things. And then by the next day, they had crews there standing by as they're watching what's going on. Of course, there is an ending to this that we'll probably have somewhere in next week's top 10 where the shooter, Mr. Card, was found dead of looked like a self-inflicted gunshot wound outside near where he used to work. Found about 7:45 p.m. Eastern time yesterday. Authorities took about an hour or so to release it to the news. A big press conference last night as I record this on Saturday morning. And now there's the aftermath of what's going on. Many people are upset because he will not see justice for the 18 people that were killed. But many people also, because we are who we are, think this is the best way to happen because we don't have to waste money on a trial or time to imprison this guy, fairly young guy who could have been in jail for some time, wasting, their words not mine, taxpayer funds on a guy who wasn't worth it. Hurricane number 2, in the number 2 spot, is Hurricane Norma, who heads for Mexico's Los Cabos resorts, and Tammy becoming a hurricane in the Atlantic. So technically 3 hurricanes. Hurricane Norma gained strength and became a major storm on Friday as it took aim at twin resorts in Los Cabos and the southern tip of Mexico's Baja California Peninsula in the Pacific. Some flights were canceled and airports were closed for at least parts of Saturday. So that right now is what's being dealt with in real time. Norma expected to hit Cabo San Lucas sometime today, probably right about as you see this recording. If you're watching on Saturday, you'll be seeing the details on Norma. Another one coming up behind Norma, of course, is Tammy. We'll see how that one plays out going in the next couple of days. The weather, I'm not really sure if this is a fast hurricane season right now going on, but Tammy popping up as hurricane strength, fairly low-ish, but it will be a deal for the Lesser Antilles going through today. So 2 hurricanes floating around right now. Should not be as strong as the original one with Otis, but we just have to see. And we take a quick pause to give you the stats for the number 1 story of this week. We tried to give it a bit more extra fanfare because we think it's worth it to see how it got here. This story at number 1 was a top story on Twitter this week, which is why it's so big. Top Facebook story, by the way, was the White Castle story about robot fry cooks, I should say. The burgers aren't being flipped by the robots just yet. So this is top story on Twitter. It got a response, more responsive of this previous story. That's a story about Hurricane Norma by 105%. That's how many more times people reacted to this one than the one previous. It also got 21% of all engagement for this week, 21.74 to be exact. And the story is more engaging than the story at the very bottom of the list. So as we said, the story listed at 197 by not too bad. Only about 553,900%. Only a 500,000% less engaging or more engaging than that story. What's the headline for this one? As you can expect, we didn't say anything so far about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift because they're the number 1 story this week. Only 1 story for them this week. And they took the job and they took it all, if you will. Travis Kelce shells out millions for more privacy amid Taylor Swift romance. This thing is actually getting pretty good, pretty big, pretty nice, if you will. And I'm not saying that this is the one because Taylor Swift, but Travis Kelce has basically bought up a nice little home, a nice little place with a lot of extra security so they can just kind of hang out in Kansas City. So he can go home and just hang out with his girl Taylor without all the beefing that's going on in the world. There was a really big article this week about when they're in New York and they had a date together and, you know, there's also security and things going on going forward. So what happens with that? Travis Kelce finds a way to fix that by buying a private home so he can do stuff with people being just his girlfriend and not have other people around. I'm not sure if there's moats or alligators or sharks with laser beams. That's all sort of conjecture. It would be really cool, but we do know there's extra security and it's nice tucked away in Kansas City so he can spend time with himself, supposedly spend more time with his girl, Taylor. Now, another quick pause because we're going to go into the stories that are going to be preparing us for the second supplemental podcast. This is a podcast supplemental to the things you might have heard, the daily newscast we have on YouTube and Facebook, where we give you top stories from the previous day to talk about going day forward. From these top 10 stories that we got from you, you told us these were the top stories of the week per the peer engagement. We pull one of them and give you another podcast called The Story of the Week. And the story of the week for you comes from one of these top 10 stories where we move them out of the top 10 order and we kind of battle the headlines back and forth to see which one has supremacy. Story of the week, this week, top story happens to be Jon Stewart's Apple TV Plus show ending. And we say reporting over China coverage and AI coverage as well. So that's the story we're going to cover in the Story of the Week podcast. It's in a separate feed. You can find it wherever your podcast, or if you're watching YouTube, it'll come out a little bit later in a audio video form. And we're going to talk about essentially the dangers of trying to get real information out there, trying to get diverse information out there, because the biggest issue with the problem with Jon Stewart is the problem with paying for quality TV. It is what it is. We'll bring that up essentially again in the also rans when we talk about a story that got big response as well, and the problem with getting out the word to people who don't want to hear the word and the gatekeepers that still do exist. The runner-up story this week is the White Castle and the robot fry cooks, because it's about technology. This is not AI taking over. This is the technology that takes over, that's making us fat and lazy, some of it for the better. Now, that means for White Castle has need for less people, flipping fries. But in theory, that means there's more people to stand at the counter and take care of folks. In reality, they're just going to put up more robot kiosks, so there's less people to talk to at all. But that was going to be the runner-up story if we got to that one. We are talking about the problem with Jon Stewart, or specifically the problem with Jon Stewart and Apple TV, and how that's going to affect what we watch going forward in everything. That's the top 10 stories of the week, plus the story we're setting up for the story of the week. What comes up next? We're going to give you the almost rants, the stories that were very, very close to being top 10 stories. In fact, most of these stories we gave a lot of coverage to inside of the daily podcast we have for things you might have heard, including especially number one. Number one got a lot of love, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Plus, we'll give you love to the one story that got basically no love, number 197, the almost relevant story of the week. We make it relevant today. We make it semi-famous. We'll see if you still care. We're coming back with that after a quick break here on the weekly wrap-up for the week ending October 28th, 2023. Today's sponsor we're going to highlight is Robinhood. And I had a big week last week dealing with Robinhood. I spent a lot of time at work trying to avoid phone calls and avoid people while listening to the earnings reports from many of my big stocks this week, because a lot of them came out overlapping on each other in the past couple of days. And so seeing how I did fairly well with those stocks were maintaining fairly well, it was great. Hearing how some of them didn't do so well, not as great, but it does happen. It is what it is. The world of investing is changing up a bit, and your chance to still play a role in that without having the big fees and having to battle out with the big time brokers who think they know what they know, is still there for you with an app like Robinhood. Today's sponsor, Robinhood, allows you to buy the stocks you want to buy and as much as you want to. In fact, you don't have to buy full stocks. If a stock you see out there is worth $500 and you only have $100 to spend, buy $100 worth of that stock. Buy it in marginal fractional shares. And you can be a part of the world of investing and get into things. They still do crypto. They still do IPOs. They still do all the things they're doing to kind of make more money, because the whole boom of getting an app and buying stocks, that whole sort of, the luster of that may be gone. But investing in your future is never a bad idea. And this is a way to spend a little pocket change, if you will, or bigger change, as you can make this your true IRA, your true investment vehicle. Now remember, stocks, investments like these can lose money and often do. So it usually is a time game you're playing, where you're trying to win over time and invest over time and see how things grow. This is not a Vegas casino, though it's kind of close, where you're looking for something that buy it at 10 and it turns to 1,000 and all of a sudden you're a billionaire. We're not talking about GameStop back in the day. We're not talking about crypto blowing up that has no actual or use for it. We're talking about actual investing in actual stocks. So my quick advice is invest in some things that you know and you like. Invest a little bit and see how it works out, and then try to throw extra at it in little monthly increments. If you hear something that's good about something else, do some research and see what's going on, and use this not so much as your main source of retirement or your main way to make a little extra money on the side. Use it as a true investment so you can do more stuff in learning. I used my Robinhood app and use my investment in companies as part of what I do for research for the stories here. As I look for things going on, we use a lot of financial news, things going on, what's happening. I can see what's going on, and it's not insider trading. It's kind of looking for trends and seeing which stories I want to invest in for the news stories, and which companies I might want to invest in because it seems like they're doing well. You can do the same thing at Robinhood. They also are still giving you a free stock for signing up. And if you use our link at the Conversation Project, we get a little kickback as well, because we at the concierge bring you into the ball. This is the conversationproject.com/Robinhood. This is conversationproject.com/Robinhood. Their original sort of thesis of, robbing from the rich and giving to the poor, giving the normal folks a chance to get into the investment world, it still applies. So you can still apply and get into things and play with some bigger level tools that Robinhood is very exclusive to. But remember, investments can lose money, and they should be taken extremely carefully when you're putting your money into it. The Conversation Project lives at thisistheconversationproject.com. Our home online is where you can find more details about what we do every single day, literally on the internet. Every day, every Monday through Friday, we have a morning show that gives you news updates from the previous day, for Monday's previous weekend. And throughout the day, all weekend long, we drop little news shorts in video form and some things online in some posting forms on things going on. Of course, all day, every 50 minutes or so, we're posting news stories across the internet on our feeds on Facebook and Twitter. So make sure you're following us on Facebook and Twitter so you can see what news we're bringing up, and your engagement in those stories tells us what to talk about. Literally, you engaged in those stories we talk about, in those top 10 stories, the most engaged stories of the week is what we provided for you here. And we do a mix of that every single morning for the things you might have heard, a podcast, video cast, for that stuff. Follow us on our online homes on Facebook, on Twitter, X, on YouTube, on TikTok. Email us at theconversationinbox@gmail.com to tell us what's going on. Stop by our partnerships page and see if there's ways we can work together to do more things together and make this a larger thing. We have a global reach, if you will. We have a lot of stuff. Ever since this thing started out, it had a large gathering of folks who attach to our international news, especially in Australia. I will never understand it, but there's a lot of people that interact with us from Australia and New Zealand. So every time a story pops up in that area, we try to throw those out there for them. A lot of Australian soap operas stuff. It is what we do. But we do focus on a global kind of thought process, and we are a US, us-based broadcast. So there's a whole lot of us in what's going on. Help us be a better us by following us on our feeds on Facebook and Twitter, and literally telling us what to talk about every single day around here. And just be a pal. We thank you for all that you want to do for us and all that you plan to do for us, especially the stuff that's simple, just takes a little time, free to you. Back to the news headlines. Now it's time to get into the almost ran headlines. These are stories ranking 11 through 15 for this week, stories that aren't quite top 10 material, but we talked about a lot of these in the daily shows. And speaking of the daily show and this first one here, at number 11, Hasan Minhaj offers detailed response to New Yorker story. This thing popped up in our news feed on Thursday, so it's probably not going to rank out to Friday, but we did some stuff on this one on Friday, and this one is, as I'm speaking right now, blowing up with a quick video apology I did to Hasan Minhaj, because we originally jumped on the first story for the New Yorker story where they were blasting him for embellishing on his comedy act. We do that a lot. We look for comedians to talk about, one, because often they're bashing them for faking things, doing stuff, and two, comedians usually have actually a closer realm of reality in their jokes and in their comedy, because they're saying things true in a way that some people can't say. So people want to know what they're thinking about on things. We've blasted Amy Schumer lately. We've blasted many of folks. We've popped in some things on Dave Chappelle as we're talking about Israel and Hamas and Palestine. People apparently asking Hasan Minhaj what he thinks about this, but he's still dealing with the backlash from the story. So very quickly, what he did was he did a 20-minute video that detailed the real details of 3 issues that the New Yorker story had. Number one, the fact that the mother told him he couldn't take his daughter to the prom because he was brown. Number 2, how he was or may not have been profiled by the FBI. Number 3, the white powder that was mailed to his house that turned into a story about taking their daughter to the hospital. Those were embellished. He explained how they're embellished. He also explained how the reporter had all the details of the embellishment, including for the prom story, correspondence with the actual girl to say that we're okay. It did happen. It was sort of weird at the time, but we've moved on. So we dropped an apology in video form, and hopefully more people are going to take this on a better scale and be better to stuff like this. At number 12, the headline reads, Kenneth Chesebro, a Donald Trump co-defendant in Georgia, pleads guilty in election conspiracy case. Now, this turned into an even larger story because Kenneth Chesebro, the second person of the 19 that were totally indicted for election conspiracy in Georgia specifically, pleaded guilty and is going to testify in the case. Of course, the first person was Sidney Powell, and we added another lawyer to the mix. The young, impressionable young woman who decided that all those older lawyers were just telling her things she should know, and then Jenna Ellis, she also pleaded guilty as well. 3 lawyers in that case, 3 people involved in the case of the 19 who are going to sing like birds and hopefully get something on Donald Trump. I think that's the point, the plan of making it work that way. But of the 19 originally indicted, 3 of them now with some semblance of immunity, not going to jail, sending some fines, saving some time, maybe saving their skins in the process. Spider-Man 2 developer Insomniac Games isn't against making a Venom spinoff if fans want it. Now, they're not working on a Venom spinoff for their Spider-Man popular game and now their new Spider-Man 2 out, but they're not against it. They will see how it plays out if the sequel to this game, which is right now doing a lot of damage, a lot of people loving the new Spider-Man 2 as you team up with both original Spider-Man and the Miles Morales Spider-Man in the game. And the Venom is not exactly in there yet, but we'll see what happens if they want to make it. And there's also no confirmed extra downloadable content for Venom or anyone else as well. Game's only been out for a couple months. We'll see how that plays out. SeaWorld Orlando welcomes 3 critically endangered small-toothed sawfish pups. Aww. You guys love this one. This was a late edition story, or actually it was an early edition story, late edition story last Friday that lasted the full weekend, but not quite strong enough to be a top 10 story. SeaWorld Orlando welcomed 3 sawtooth sawfish pups on July 11, 2023. The marine animals, which look like little sharks with their saw-shaped rostrums, are critically endangered and receive regular checkups to ensure their sustained health. A small sawfish are raised with shark-like bodies and a rostrum edge with teeth. They are olive gray to brown on top with a white underside. There you go. New babies at the conservatory, even though people have their issues with the conservatory. And number 15 this week, restaurants now charging customers a fee for bad parenting, usually around $50. This is a restaurant. We got the story from ABC 7 in New York. So this is a New York-based restaurant, a real restaurant that the owner said, if your kid's making a scene, your kid's acting out at my place, we're going to charge you. Just like they charge you some places for wasting food at a buffet, they're going to charge you for your kids acting out. He added a $50 fee to a bill for various children's behavior, and the wife, for one, took the bill outside. Wife of one patron took the children outside while the person having to pay the bill made it done. So the person said, if you have kids, don't go there, because essentially the owner was rude to the kids anyway. And he was kind of the point, made the kid cry, made the kid act up. But this is a really thing. This is something that really happened. An owner of a restaurant just said, hey, your kid's acting up. I'm adding $50 to your bill. Pay me and leave. Because it happens. And now, quick pause as you prepare yourself for the magnificence that is the almost irrelevant story of the week. Not so magnificent, but you know where to get to. This is our out part. We'll remind you that we are homed online at thisistheconversationproject.com. That's our online home for the replays, the background, links to sponsors, links to a partnerships page, and other things there. Find out what you need to know about us by going to our website. This is theconversationproject.com. And email us at theconversationinbox@gmail.com, because we need the conversation back and forth so we know what to do better for you guys out there in the world. Our feeds, once again, are facebook.com/this is the conversation project and twitter.com/th_conversation, because the feeds give us the content. You go to the feeds and engage in the stories we're posting all day long, every 50 minutes, all day long. And the stories with the most engagement, those are what we talk about. And this story we're talking about because it got basically no engagement. This is the almost irrelevant story of the week. The story at the very bottom, number 197 for the week. The headline reads, New York City losing rental housing because people combine apartments. This one, maybe not so relevant, but it's an interesting story on a business level. New York City is losing density in some places. You can blame people expanding their apartments. Over the last 70 years, 50,000 multifamily buildings have been converted into 1 or 2 family homes. So part of the research for this is the fact that apartment consolidation is not so much a bad thing, but it does mean less places to live. And in a place like New York City, where the rental rates are already high anyway, because of there's only so places to stay and there's only so much space you can move into. When people have the capacity to combine some places into a larger space for a family or a grouping of people, that means less places for non-families and smaller groupings of people. That's how the market works. So New York City is seeing a big boom, I should say, in dwellings being combined for more space to turn them into, office spaces or other things there, and a bust in the actual findings for people looking for individual apartments, as one may expect. This story, not so much one of those stories I'm surprised got no love, or surprised it didn't get as much love because it seems like it's more important. But this one, as we told you, as less responsive, not right, really grammatically correct, but less responsive than the top story of Travis Kelce buying a mansion with security guards and whatnots so he can hang out with his girlfriend by 535,900%. That's a whole lot of not caring about this one story. But we're glad you care about us, and we're glad that we're here for you, and we'll do more for you here for the Conversation Project and the weekly wrap-up. But we're wrapping up for today. We're done. The week ending October 28, 2023, all said and done in the books for this week's project. We want to remind you that our feeds are on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook.com/This is the Conversation Project and Twitter.com/th_conversation for your chance to vote the stories up in the conversation, and remind you to stay hydrated and stay limber and on task for all the grand things you're here to do. We want you here to, watch our videos and click our links. We also want you to do all those massively awesome things you do in your community. With that, I say adieu. We're going to prep for the next podcast, which is the story of the week. Recording this one right after this one. So in about an hour after you see this drop, you'll see the story of the week, so you can check those up as well. And of course, preparing for Monday, for the Monday edition of Things You Might Have Heard, which give you the next 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all wrapped up into 10 stories for you to get into. So what story will be the top 10 stories next week, and what stories will be in the countdown for, not really countdown, but the headlines for Monday? Only you can tell us by following us in the feeds. Let us know what's going on and seeing what stories you deem are conversational. We'll do the rest here from the Conversation Project. From all the family and friends and folks engaged with this Conversation Project, I say thank you. Let's do this thing again next weekend, shall we?